Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I'm the host, as always. Excited to be joined again on the show by ESPN's Kris Rhim. Kris, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you back. Obviously having you back on means that we're close to training camp. So the rookies reported yesterday when we're recording this, and so the veterans report next week. And so we're really excited to get into some training camp questions with Kris. Obviously, Tyler was unable to join us today, so it's just me and Kris today. So we're excited to that. Today's interview with Kris is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. We got all kinds of stuff coming up with the Olympics and things like that. So it's a great time to get into the game ahead of football season. You guys can go to prizepicks.com/guilty for a deposit match up to $100. That being said, Kris, let's dive in here. So you guys in the media, you got to go tour the Bolt recently. The Chargers put out an interview with Ben Herbert from the training facility. So what was your kind of first impression from the new facility? You've covered 3 different NFL teams now. How did it stack up to what you've seen previously? What was your impression of the Bolt last week?
Yeah. I mean, it was the nicest of the facilities I've seen, and I've covered a bunch of different teams, and then when I did the national thing for a year, I saw a different bunch of facilities, and this was the nicest for sure. And I mean, it should be, right? Like they have the newest facility for one. If it wasn't, that would be kind of concerning. But even with that being said, I thought it was really cool. I think the coolest part, I guess 2 of the coolest parts were they have outside of some of the team meeting rooms or maybe the position group meeting rooms. I think it might have been defense and offense. There's a strip of grass like on the second level of the facility where like you're in a meeting and you can go outside. You can just step outside the door and you can go through whatever you guys were talking about right there. So that was pretty cool to me. And then the indoor outdoor weight room was a really cool setup. So yeah, I thought it was cool, man. And I live in LA proper, so it's good that the facility isn't in Orange County anymore. So my gas is lower.
Yeah, lower commute for the media. That's always good. The vibe overall just it fits in really well with like that area of Manhattan Beach, right? The indoor outdoor living is like something you hear on like all the real estate shows and things like that. So I thought that was cool. The weight room aspect of things seems great. I know that was a big, the NFLPA grade surveys were not super kind to the Chargers' previous facility, but it was a temporary facility. It wasn't anything state of the art. So I would imagine that next year's survey, they get a lot of A's, coming down the pipeline. So excited to see what that can look like for this team in a great area as well. Kind of on that note, everything's been very positive for this offseason, obviously, after, a poor season, which you covered wonderfully. There's been a lot of everybody's bought in, everybody's happier. People are looking at the home run derby from Justin Herbert's trip in Eugene this past weekend and saying that he's come out of his shell. What do you make of like the overall just like positive vibes that have come from the Chargers this offseason?
Yeah, I'll say this, man. Like everybody's undefeated at this point of the season, right? And I wasn't here, but I remember being a part of the media when Brandon Staley got hired, and he was when he got here, he was this guy who was kind of super charming. Like he was a media darling. He he spoke for a while. He spoke about concepts, and he answered questions, and he was thoughtful, and people really liked him a lot, and that turned fast.
Yeah.
So I think if the reports and if the energy was bad, that would be an extremely bad sign, right? Like it's hard for you to lose with a new head coach, especially Jim Harbaugh in the offseason, for you to have any kind of negatives or anything like that. But as someone like you've been around this team, you've covered the team. I do think that at least with Justin, like he seems different, right? Like I do think that his opening press conference, I've just been on this beat since September of last season. I've watched everything that I can and studied everything I can to know, what these guys were like beforehand. But, at least since I've been here, Justin's press conference during minicamp, he spoke for 26 minutes. He was joking. He was smiling. He was comfortable. not that he's ever angry or upset up there, but he's not the type of person to kind of give you this back and forth or jovial. It's kind of straight to business, and maybe that's the off season. But I don't know. He does seem a little bit more comfortable. That Justin's been his presser. I was like, wow, this is different. Even Joey Bosa and Khalil, they were also,
You're like checking your watch. You're like, oh, we're still going. Okay.
yeah. I'm like, oh, he's opening up. Like it was cool. Honestly, it was cool. So yeah, I think. So yeah, I think the hype is a good thing for the Chargers, and it should be that way. Like if it wasn't this way, that would be very concerning. Like what's going on?
Yeah, I think Chase Daniel had Justin on his podcast, and that felt very much like the old like Justin Herbert. But then you watch the press conference. I don't know. Maybe it's just something about being around Jim is bringing a more natural media presence about him. But I think it goes a little bit of both ways, because you watch some of his other stuff, and he still very much, I think, avoids the spotlight. Like he doesn't do any other media appearances. I think he just went on Chase's podcast because they're really good friends. But even that, like you could tell that, like this was probably a bit much for him. So, I think there's a bit of give and take there, but I think overall the positive vibes are fantastic. Like you mentioned, you want things to kind of start off on a lighter note, and I think they've been able to do that. So training camp is next week, pads the week after that. We'll see how kind of the tone changes, if it changes, here in a minute. But getting to some training camp questions here, I think one of the most interesting things that's going to come out of training camp are things in the secondary, and I think we can start there. Obviously, we know what the Chargers have with Derwin James and Alohi Gilman, but how settled or unsettled do you think the rest of the secondary is around the two starting safeties?
I mean, if I had to guess it, I think it's pretty settled. I mean, I would think Asante, I would think Christian, I would think Jasir. I guess the slot spot would be the question, and I also think the biggest question, at least in my mind, in the secondary, is who the third safety is, right? Because that safety is going to play a ton, right? Because when I'm thinking of star slot, Derwin's going to be there a lot, right? So who is going to? And he talked about that in his press conference, like why he was excited about Tony Jefferson signing, because he thought, I can play close to the line of scrimmage, I can roam around more. So I think that battle for the third safety spot is kind of what I've kept my eyes on, because that person is going to play a lot, because we saw throughout his career, right? And Jesse's talked about that, moving Derwin around. So I think that third safety spot will kind of have a domino effect on other positions, right? But in my mind, if that makes sense, that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, that's totally fair. The third safety in a lot of defenses these days is going to play 500, 600 snaps. Derwin's been healthy the last 2 seasons, but there's obviously an injury history there. Alohi missed time last year, so there's a chance that whoever's the third safety ends up starting for a stretch of games. We'll see what happens at slot corner. So you feel like Asante and Christian, like it's pretty much unquestioned, or do you think that Cam Hart, Dean Leonard, somebody else could maybe give them a run in training camp?
I don't think so, honestly. I think Asante and Christian are locked in there. I mean, and I'm not reporting that or anything like that. That's just my my estimated guess, and from what we saw, and obviously it's mini camp, right? But and anybody can lose a job, right? Like Targhee, he was really strong in mini camp. He impressed me a lot, and he impressed the coaches a lot. So obviously no door is closed, but if Christian were to, I think Asante is solidified, but if Christian were to lose that job, someone would have to make a really big leap in training camp.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's talk about the defensive line group next here, because I think we, at least on our show, like we feel good about Morgan Fox and his specific role. Poona Ford's a veteran, but outside of that, do you think this defensive tackle room, is there an addition coming? Do you think they feel great about this room? Do you expect them to perform over expectations? Because I feel like a lot of fans, when we talk about like the weakest position group on the team, I feel like defensive tackle gets mentioned quite a bit.
For sure, and I mean for probably for good reason. I like you said, I think Morgan is a quality player, and Puna as well. But I mean, I'll say this about Joe Ortiz, and when you look at the Ravens really never stop adding players. Like at any spot throughout the year, it seems like they're always, I was there in Baltimore.
Hmm.
They're always, adding people or at least looking to add people. So I wouldn't say for any position, but especially this one that they're done. But I do think that people are right to think that this group on paper is the weakest group. I also am interested to see, um, because I don't want to skip if you're going to talk about the outside guy edge rushers in a second, but I'm also interested to see how in what ways, because one of the things that Lord Bud Dupree here was the idea that he would be a part of these groupings that would feature three edge guys, right?
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how often. I mean, that's kind of a package thing, and how often they'll do that, but if he's in the mix at all there. Um, but yeah, I think that if I was considering two, we talked about this pre-draft, that interior, D-line position was concerning, and you know, Justin Eboigbe too. He'll be a guy there that could step up, and he can play all over the line. So and he's really like massive in person too. Like I don't think I realized how big he is. But yeah, so I think they're excited about him as well and his potential, in that group.
Yeah, I think his versatility, I think Thule's versatility, Bud can kick inside. I think Joey can kick inside. I I think Jesse Minter just overall is like one of the most interesting people in the NFL that not a lot of people are talking about. Like, I was listening to Robert Mays and Bill Barnwell talk about like coaches and players that could swing the NFL season. It's like, well, nobody's really talking about Jesse Minter because it's not like he has this great, talented roster. I mean, obviously that we feel great about the edge rusher room, we feel great about the starting safeties, but Jesse Minter could kind of just mad scientist this thing and maybe
Right.
exceed expectations. What's kind of been your impression of him so far, and what are you looking to see in training camp from him?
I mean, he's like a calm dude, man. He's like he's very calm on the podium. He's very yeah. He almost feels like younger than he actually is, and he a confident guy. Excited. I think he's really excited about working with the unit that they have. But yeah, I think what I'm looking for in training camp is to see what he does with the edge guys, because there's so much talent there, and that's what I'm looking at, right? I mean, I think I think Derwin. I think how he enables Derwin, right? Because
Mm.
I think if Derwin's back to the Derwin James, an All Pro level player, that's the Chargers are a different team. The defense is a different defense. So I think priority number one, that's what I'm looking at in training camp. How is he employing Derwin? What does he have Derwin doing? Is Derwin wearing a million hats again, or is there some stuff off his plate? Because yeah, so I think that's number one, and then two, the edge guys, because that's such a talented group. But I also think there's a balance when you have a young player like Thule, who's growing and needs reps and needs snaps to make mistakes and to have successes so he can get better. How do you balance that with a Bud Dupree? How do you balance that, getting him in different spots, getting him reps, with a crowded group now and a talented
Yeah.
group? That's what I'm looking for with him for sure.
Yeah, the when they signed Bud Dupree, we were kind of like, it kind of raised an eyebrow, right? Like we're like, oh, like of all of the places where you could use like a player like him, you choose another edge rusher. So you understand why, obviously, and it's going to be an exciting thing to watch, especially these guys going to go up against Rashawn and Joe Alt every single day in practice is going to be a fun battle to watch. Let's switch gears there to the offense. I think the wide receiver position and how that gets sorted out, like the pecking order, is one of the most interesting things that people are really focusing on. There's a lot of Lad McConkey hype, like a lot of Lad McConkey hype, and I share some of that. I'm not gonna lie, But Chase Daniel was on the Rich Eisen show. A couple of references for Chase today. Shout out Chase Daniel, I guess. He thinks that Ladd could catch 100 passes and that Justin Herbert just loves Ladd McConkey. What are you buying and selling in the wide receiver room? Because Josh Palmer is kind of just waving in the background, like, "Hey, I'm over here too." So, what are you buying and selling from this receiver group?
I don't think I'm buying 100 catches, no. But I am buying that Justin loves Ladd. I think Justin likes Ladd a lot. I think they're really close already. You saw them on stage at the Zach Bryan concert. You can already see by their social medias they're together pretty often. And then Ladd is just also a great player, right? Like the way he runs his routes, and that's why they drafted him. It reminds me a lot. Last training camp, I was in Baltimore. It reminds me of the way he doesn't run the routes similar to this guy, but when you look at everyone runs their routes and then you look at how Ladd runs the routes, it's the same way Zay Flowers looked compared to all the Ravens receivers. And that's the kind of impact I think I could see Ladd having in the offense. I think Zay had 77 catches last year, around 800 yards. So 858 yards. So I think that's a comparable spot for him. I think he could be around, 60 to 80 catches, 700 to 900 yards, right? I don't know I think Josh is a really good player. And I think Josh you can tell at the podium when guys are saying something, but they aren't saying something. When Josh was asked about, stepping up after Keenan and Mike left, he gave the answer, I think he just gave I'm trying to, but he kind of paused for a minute, and if it almost felt like he had been thinking about this moment, or if, something of that sort, right? And he even posted on his Instagram after those guys left, kind of a caption leading to, it's his time now, right? The issue with him is health. Last season, he missed, I think, 8 games with that knee injury and 1 with the concussion, 7 with the knee, 1 with the concussion. So, yeah. So I'm not buying into 100 catches, but I think it's good to be excited about Ladd. He'll be a good player, and I think he'll contribute in this offense a lot.
Yeah, 100 catches. That's a bold one. I've got to admit. But if he has 70 catches and 800 yards, I think that's a fantastic rookie season. I think becomes a guy that you can really hang your hat on. So love to hear that him and Justin are getting close, because that aspect of Justin, I think, is so crucial. Like, he has to trust you and know where you're going to be. Like, he's so big on that mental connection. So love to hear that. Just out of curiosity, when you were talking about the Zay Flowers thing, I went and looked at the RAS website, and for what it's worth for our listeners here, Ladd McConkey actually ran faster in every split than Zay Flowers did. So, similar vertical jumps, similar broad jumps. Obviously, Ladd's a bit taller, but Ladd's 186 and Zay's 182. So the athletic comparison there also kind of checks out. So should be a fun one to see in training camp there.
Yeah.
Let's get to the offensive line group, because Jim Harbaugh kind of anointed Trey Pipkins a starter already at right guard. I think a lot of us, myself included, were like, well, don't you want to get pads on first, at least kind of see what's going on here? What are your thoughts as he dubs the starting unit in May? Do you think that's going to stick, and what's kind of your expectation of how that unit can kind of come together?
I mean, I think that 6'6" is tall for a guard for sure. When I heard that, it made me wonder, how does Kyler Murray play quarterback? How does Tua play quarterback? Like,
Bryce Young's even shorter than those two.
Yeah, Bryce Young, like that made me think about that for real. But I think, on paper, right, May is super early, right? Because a lot of times when I talk to people, I always say, when they ask me about mini camp or they ask me about the off-season program, what I'm seeing and who looks good, I'm like, man, no, if I was telling you someone looked like extremely dominant or something like that, I'd be lying, because half the time they're going to have speed. The directives are not to, you're just going through the motions pretty much. So
right.
I think what this says is that, those guys showed enough in their meetings, and maybe in things we aren't seeing on the field as well, that he felt comfortable enough to make that move. I also think having a guy as experienced as Trey, having him next to Joe is a benefit, right? And I think it's the best group on paper. Again, like you said, we haven't seen anything with pads on, so that was surprising. But yeah, I think it's a group that'll stick. It makes sense for sure. Yeah, and they call the O line their superstars, so I think it's the most important group on the team under this regime.
Yeah, it's going to be very curious what that looks like next year when they have a lot more cap space. But I think I made the argument that putting Trey next to Joe was like about the veteran aspect of things, and his ability to have this kind of Rolodex of several different offenses, and he played with Rivers, he played with Herbert, he played with Tyrod. Like, there's just a more experience there that he can kind of lean on, and obviously he played right tackle, so he can kind of be there for Joe at every single turn. So I'm excited to see how that group plays out. I really am. I'm so curious what Trey looks like at guard, because you mentioned he's very, very tall. I think the Chargers probably will have the tallest, offensive line in the league if they don't already. But yeah, that and the second unit, I think, is curious to see how that gets sorted out as well. Last question here for me, and then I'll let you go here. I think every single season there are players who can swing a season for a team, and whether it's like a dark horse who comes out of nowhere or a player just takes a huge step forward. If you had to maybe give me one player on offense, one player on defense who could really like swing the Chargers season in one way or another, who would you kind of point to there?
Does it have to be like a non-star or just one player?
No, it could be whoever you want. If you want it to be a non-star, you can. If you want it to be maybe a backup, kind of you feel great about as well.
Okay, that could swing the Chargers season. Offensively, I'll go with J.K. Dobbins. I think J.K., when he's healthy, is one of the best running backs in the league. He averages like under 6 yards a carry. Like he's a very good player. But the enormous caveat is that he's often not healthy, right? He's, coming off of an Achilles, rupture, and, an ACL. So if JK is healthy, he's by far the best back they have. Again, coming off an Achilles. So yeah, I think offensively, I would say him. Defensively, I would say Derwin. I feel like Derwin's kind of too obvious, so I'll say Derwin number one, and then Joey Bosa, because it's the same reasons as JK, right? Like when he's on the field, like we saw that Jets game last year, Joey had 2.5 sacks, forced fumble. The defense was dominant. Yes, it's the Jets, but we saw the Jets go to play against Kansas City, and Zach Wilson looked lights out, and these, it doesn't matter really, right? Like we've seen him at his peak, and if him and Khalil and Thule and Bud are going, man, that's a scary unit, right? Like there's probably not a few better pairings at edge. So those are my swing players. I cheated a little bit, but let's just say I said Joey and JK.
No, I think that's the right. I mean, obviously, there are some question marks about Derwin, and we've talked about this. He did not play well last season. I think he would be upfront with that as well. But the upside that you could get if Joey and JK stay healthy is just tremendous. We just don't know that. So I think those are two really good choices. All right, Kris, thanks so much for joining us, man. What's coming down the road here for you as we get closer and closer to training camp?
Yeah, I got time to lock in. I have a job again. Just kidding. I've been working. But yeah, it's I'll have a lot of stuff coming. I'll have a 53-man roster projection coming soon. Don't kill me for it, please. It's early, so it's early. Don't kill me for it. You guys call me an idiot. Then I have what else do I have? Biggest storylines coming up. Biggest question, kind of. A bunch of content is coming, man. Really excited about this season and covering this team. So, and really excited you guys have me on again.
Yeah, appreciate the time. Looking forward to that. Unfortunately, means less NCAA for you and everybody else. Media beat, I'm sure, is really soaking up the time off. I don't know if you saw this, but Mike Garafolo broke the Brandon Ayuk news while he was golfing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He was literally on the golf course talking to Tom Pelissero about it.
Oh, wow.
So, all the media guys, you got to get back to the grind. So Excited to see it. Excited to listen and read all of your coverage, and hopefully we can link up down there in El Segundo. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us today. Appreciate Kris for tuning in. Appreciate all of you guys for watching. Make sure comment, like, review, all that stuff does help continue to grow the show. Make sure follow Kris and read all of his stuff. It's fantastic. One of the best in the business for sure. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll see you next time. As always, bolt up.